test drove it.
All right. Is that working? Can you hear me? Okay. Hey, welcome everybody. So we are in the second track of today, keeping your own, retaining your best when the talent pool is shallow. So Mr. Brad Schneider is going to help us out with that. Just a reminder, you have the QR codes on your table. Somebody said something's a little funky with them. So we're going to talk with Sonia and Melissa just to make sure that that's working. And in the meantime, hopefully online, you can see everything. We've just had a couple little glitches, but we're getting those worked out right now. So, all right, Brad.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Before we get started, just a few ground rules on this beautiful, sunny, fake. It's kind of that fake fall Friday, right? Where everything looks beautiful. Then you step outside and you go, oh my God, I can't believe how cold it is, right? So, hey, as we go through today, I would like this to be as interactive as possible. So your questions are absolutely welcome, as well as your comments and your feedback on things. So as we're going through, if something pops up, please feel free to jump in and pop in and add your 2 cents. I always find when I do these that when it's more of you and less of me, it's usually a better event. So try to keep that spirit in mind. Same to you folks joining us at Zoom today, welcome. And working through our moderators, same thing. If you have a question and something that pops up, feel free, and love to be able to talk with you about that topically at that moment in time. So my name is Brad Schneider. I own a company called The Growth Coach. We work in a variety of different small and mid-sized businesses based here in Central Ohio, but do work all throughout the state, and even have a couple of clients that drug me as far west as California. But one of the main things that I do, and one of the kind of core things that we do, is we develop frontline leaders. It's a space and a gap for a lot of organizations where we promote the person that happened to be the best at the job, and we kind of hand them the opportunity to become that leader. And then it's kind of, hey, go figure it out. So that's exactly how I learned, probably how many of you learned as well. And so I've made it a core piece of my business to try to help develop the skill sets of those folks. And it's a kind of a group that's always kind of near and dear to my heart to me. And I think it's become more and more important as the world's been changing and evolving around us over the last 20 months or so. And we'll talk a little bit about today how we can kind of use those folks and use those skill sets to help us keep our own. But before I dive into that, just curious, quick show of hands, how many of you feel 100% comfortable that you'll have the workforce that you need to do what you need to do over the course of the next, say, 3 to 5 years? The sarcasm I bring comes for free with your admission as well. So we are all facing and fighting those challenges. And so I've got some good news, and I'll go ahead and ask you to move to the next slide if you could, please, and talk a little about the agenda today. Oh, that's one other thing too. If you are sitting at a table in here joining us, I did leave a copy of the slide deck as a handout on the table, so feel free to grab that along the way. And so the first thing I want to do is talk to you a little bit about labor trends. And so you're all feeling the pinch right now, and I'm going to play like a negative weather guy for you here in a second and show you that it's probably not going to get much better based on what the Bureau of Labor Statistics has recently released, what they've been talking about. And so for me then, the big challenge, the big issue is, how do I keep my own folks? And especially in the world that you all work in, how do I do that when I can't necessarily raise my rates and I can't necessarily raise the revenue streams to be able to pay people more? And so we have to be able to get creative. And so I'm going to cover 5 different areas for you that don't require you to actually create a pay increase for anybody, but they're things that I have found to be effective throughout my career, but especially in the last 12 to 18 months as organizations are fighting this battle and trying to find ways to keep their best folks to be able to help weather the storm, so to speak, and then be able to come through to the other side. So if you wouldn't mind moving ahead to the next slide here, I'd like to begin the depression part of this discussion today. Recent data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that we are projected to trend down from 61.7% of the labor force participation rate to 60.4% in 2030. Now, this part probably isn't a huge surprise because we've been talking about the large group of baby boomers that we've had for a while now. We knew there, as they age down, they're going to be leaving that top part of the population. What I think is particularly changed is, there's a lot, you hear a lot of stuff in the media, right, about what's going on. One thing that I've found to be absolutely true is the notion of the Great Resignation. If there's anybody that's, say, north of 55 and has some financial options in order, they are exercising them right now, and they are making choices to leave, maybe working altogether, but at least the traditional workforce, and maybe going off to do some other things, whether it's to start their own business or do something freelance or what have you. So the data, as well as at least my own personal experience, tells me that pinch is absolutely happening, sort of at the top end of the age range, if you will, of the workforce. If I could have you move to the next exciting, unoptimistic statistic. One that you may have probably felt a little bit more clearly is that the employment rate of younger people has been declining, and has been declining for a while. And for me, this actually first kind of hit me about 6 years ago. Before I started my business, I was working inside an organization where we were trying to hire manufacturing engineers. And I remember going to these job fairs and interviewing these co-ops and like, wow, this kid's got a great GPA and, you know, he's got a really good engineering program. And then you see his resume and it says top work experience, babysat for my aunt and uncle, philanthropy chair for my fraternity, volunteered at such and such organization. Kids are not working. And kids that are starting in the workforce, or young adults, if you will, are starting later and later and later. And a lot of times for a lot of the service agencies and organizations that I work with, those are some of those first employment opportunities for folks. And so while most of us in this room, as we were growing up, maybe had 3 or 4 jobs with the time you hit 21, most of us now, when we're hiring somebody in their early 20s, it's potentially job 1 for them. And so part of that labor pinch we're feeling is younger kids are just not jumping into the workforce, or not even the traditional one. I did a similar presentation to this a couple of weeks ago to one of my local chambers of commerce. And an individual in there said his daughter right now is making about $1,000 a week. And I forget the name of the website, but she's basically going to thrift stores, buying thrift items, marking them up, selling them online, and pulling $1,000 a week. Those are the people that used to be in the workforce, working for some of your agencies, working at restaurants and things like that. I don't think that's the total answer, but that's part of the answer and part of the reason why younger folks aren't necessarily getting into the workforce the way they used to. More depression, please, if you can move to the next slide. Now, how about those of us in that 25 to 54 range that are in the kind of, I forget what's the legal term there from them, the prime age population is what the Bureau of Labor Statistics would tell you. This group is also dropping as well. And I think this is ramped up as well, especially with COVID. As COVID kind of struck up, people started changing or kind of questioning their values, deciding what they wanted to do with their lives and things like that. And so even before we got to that number in that prime age category has been drifting down a little bit, and it's going to continue to drift down into 2030, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I don't know if I've depressed folks enough yet, so could you go one more slide, please? So I put this up here with a green one, but it's really about economic growth. And so the interesting thing is, while all of our workforce rates continue to decline and pool of population that can come work for us are declining, we're anticipating only creating like another 1 million new jobs every year between now and 2030. So I was an English major in college, but when the supply goes down and the demand goes up, that's a trouble for us when we're kind of on the bias side of the market from employees. And so those are some of the statistical challenge and statistical trends that are coming through, that if you're feeling that pinch, data-wise, this is why some of those things are happening. And if I could have you go one more, maybe not as depressing, but more an observation, is because of the structure of work and how work is changing, what used to be the 9-to-5 workforce and that expectation of 40 hours a week, 9 to 5, is getting broken up pretty heavily. And so most of our organizations are built around a full-time strategy with 8 hours a day for a certain number of days a week, or maybe you do 10s or however you all work that. But what people are expecting in the workplace and how things are kind of adjusting and changing is folks are looking more and more for that flexibility. And that's the message that's out there. And so we're in a service industry, which means we have to serve people when they need to be served, not necessarily when I want to serve them from my couch at home in my remote position, which makes our challenge even more difficult. So by now you're probably all ready to go either one of two ways. Either thanks for reminding me of all the crap that I'm dealing with every day, Brad, or you're ready to just leave and call it a weekend. But the good news is there's some things that we can do and some action we can take. And so that's what I wanted to talk about is, and kind of leaning into that. If you go ahead and move to the next slide, please. You know, I kind of started with this one, and this is like kind of the first thing that I think is important for businesses to do. And I'm sure we have some Shawshank fans here in the crowd. All right, let's see if you can complete the line with me. If I'm red, you can get busy living or you can get busy dying. Okay, now it's not that depressing, but one of the first things I think we need to stop doing as organizations is stop playing economist and stop trying to figure out where everybody went. I have spent countless unproductive hours with my clients lamenting, complaining, getting frustrated about and wondering where all the people were going. When are they coming back? Is it unemployment? Is it child tax credit? Blah, you know, we can go down the line. Here's the reality. The data tells us we're not going to have the same size of pool. All the conversations and all the machinations of how we've gone around things and all those little things. Hey, when unemployment stops, it'll be better, right? And when this happens, it'll be better. Guess what? It's not getting better, right? So all we're doing is spinning our wheels and wasting energy when we find ourselves, or we found our teams getting like lost in those things, which are interesting economic and philosophical questions, but they're taking us away from the issue at hand, which is what can we do about it? And so one of the things that I think is really important for us is that we just have to face reality, and we have to be able to be open to that. And we have to start thinking about what can we do within our reality, because the reality of it is although you all have some pretty unique challenges in workforce, you also have some interesting strengths and opportunities in terms of the type of work you do and the type of people you can appeal to do that work. And when we get caught up in all those negatives and all those external factors we have no control over, we start to lose the things that differentiate you all as employers as you go to the marketplace and try to sell yourselves as a great opportunity for somebody to bring their career to you. And so one of the first things that I've tried to do with my clients is get everybody to start doing a bit of a SWOT analysis. And how many of you have done that strategically for your businesses? How many of you have done that thinking about yourself as an employer and your strengths as an employer, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? So good, a couple of you. Well, you're really going to hate the next couple minutes, because what I was going to ask everybody to do is the very next slide, if you would please, is sort of a blank SWOT template. And if you're like me and most of the clients I work with, you're moving 1,000 miles an hour, and your chance to stop and think about some of these things doesn't happen very often. And so what I wanted to do is just give you 2 or 3 minutes, grab a pen, and I want you to just think about yourselves as an employer. And I want you to just do a normal SWOT analysis. What are the things we're really strong at as an employer, that we're great at as an employer? What are those things that maybe we're weak at? What are some of those opportunities? Those things that, you know, if we did this, we could make ourselves stronger. We could take advantage of a market condition or something to that effect that we could look at. And then ultimately the threats, those things that are bubbling up there that may hold us back. And I'll give you a couple, 3 minutes to just do some brainstorming and jot things down. Give you about 1 minute and 3 more seconds, and I'll pull everybody back together. Okay. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what are some of those strengths that you see of yourself as an employer? If you wouldn't mind just kind of calling them out and identifying some of those things, what makes you a really good and attractive employer? Your culture. Okay. Anything specific about your culture? Okay, good deal. So carrying leadership, putting employees first, in case you all couldn't hear that on Zoom. What are some other strengths that you identified? Yes, please. Okay. So good reputation for having a strong impact with your community and taking care of families. I'm not trying to parrot. I just want to make sure everybody on Zoom can hear. What else did you identify? Okay. So good benefit package and something that could be attractive to folks beyond just the individual pay rate. Okay. Anything else you're good at? Okay. More culture opportunities. Good deal. How about from an I'm sorry, go ahead, please. Absolutely. That's one of the reasons a handful of my clients are in your space and are here at the conference. And for me, as somebody that works with a lot of businesses, that's one of the reasons why I love working with them. I like working with people that are making a difference and having an impact, especially at an individual level, the way you all do on literally a day-to-day basis. Were you going to add something else? Okay. So having the opportunity to promote from within, an opportunity to kind of grow or even start a career, depending on where you're at. Absolutely. You have good DSPs. What's good about them? Okay. So you have a group that has high standards and a high quality of commitment to the work that you're doing and things of that nature, if I'm hearing you right. Okay, excellent. Good deal. How about on the opportunity sides of things? I'm going to avoid the weaknesses and threats because I think we're all pretty good at dwelling on those on a regular basis. But opportunity wise, what are some of those things that you've looked at and thought, if we could do this, we could probably be a more attractive or a better employer, either for our existing folks or folks that you're still looking to hire? Organization and training, orientation and training. I'm sorry. What do you want to try to improve in that area? Okay. Yeah, I mean, if we've got good orientation and training, people feel comfortable about walking in the door day one. They always feel good about the employment choice that they made right off the bat when we're organized and ready to go. And then the opportunity to feel confident and comfortable what we're doing on the job. Absolutely. Big strengths. Places too that other employers oftentimes struggle to invest in. What else do you see? Improve your employment ads. In what way? Okay. Yeah, I would agree. And you'll hear me talk a little bit later. You're all in the marketing business now. whether you like it or not, right? And part of it is selling the career opportunities, either folks on the outside or, more importantly, in my perspective, the folks on the inside, and what that means for folks along the way. So I would agree wholeheartedly, whether it's your ads themselves or just how you think about and talk about the work experience for somebody in your organizations, that's a good opportunity to really accentuate the positive and let people see those opportunities that you've all felt and experienced as being people that have grown up and progressed in the industry, that maybe folks need to be able to see a little bit more clearly, because maybe it's not as obvious to them based on just the conditions around us right now. Yes, please. Okay. And so those changes in service models and that participation increase, is that like in the form of maybe like variety of work or learning new skills or experiences or something? Excellent. So being a part of the process and being somebody that's engaged with and choosing, hey, as our models change, as our processes changed, I had some influence in that. I had the ability to contribute to that change, things of that nature. Excellent example. Anything else comes to mind in terms of opportunities? Yes, please. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So how do you use technology to help with the shortage in staffing? And then I think the other side that I see too sometimes is, how do you make lives easier for everybody administering everything with technology too? And there are opportunities there to spend less time on all of the required things that we have to do. And maybe by freeing some of those things up, whether it's technology or process, the ability then to have more of that direct one-to-one impact that you all love to deliver and that you're great at delivering in our communities. Anything else? Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Yeah. So having that good reputation of being able to leverage it and take advantage of it, right? And not sort of acknowledge it humbly, but own it and use it as a way to attract people. Absolutely. So you had something? I think that's an excellent point. And just to restate it for the folks on Zoom, if you couldn't hear that, that with some of the attrition that you've had, the folks that you have now are truly committed. And I think you're 1,000% right. Sometimes we hesitate to want to make that investment because we don't know if somebody's going to be here, or they're really committed to the work we're doing or whatnot. And, you know, while it's been a challenge, certainly with everything that you've all been going through, I agree. This has been a bit of a litmus test. Like, if you're really serious about this field, you like the work you're doing, you like working here, you're still here. And that's a great sign and an indication for us that we've got somebody committed to us. So great observation. Excellent. So here's the thing is, as much as there is that's kind of frustrating and depressing out there about some of the things environmentally around us, you all have a lot to offer people from a career standpoint. And when you think about all the jobs out there, and no disrespect to my friends at Amazon that are barcoding and scanning and zipping things around, right? But like, there's only so much people want to work for a particular dollar an hour, right? And we all know in here, for the most part, you guys aren't going to be able to compete on price in the labor market. And so we've got to hug and embrace those positive things that we have and use them aggressively to not just go out and find new people, but to remind the folks that are still with us why we're a great place to be, and continue to encourage them to buy into those things and make them participants in that process and give them ownership in things, and being able to reinvest in them and let them really see your commitment to the field, the individuals that you serve, and ultimately the folks that are inside your door. And that's hard to do when we're stuck in the negative trap of, we can't find anybody, we can't find anybody, we can't find anybody. So for me, that's number one. And then one of the things that I've seen that clients that I work with have had success with is when they've started focusing on the strengths that they have and they start focusing on the opportunities to improve, those weaknesses start to diminish. Those threats may still be there, but the threats maybe aren't as imminent or knocking at the door as hard as they used to be. And we can start to take back a little bit of control of our challenge from a workforce perspective by really reinvesting and doubling down on those strengths and selling those strengths, not just to the folks inside of our organizations, but then also out in the community as well. If I go ahead and have you bump to the next slide, please. All right. So another thing that I'm seeing organizations do are finding ways to add value in other ways that aren't normally what they would typically do. And what I mean by this, for instance, I have a client who's a landscaper. And if y'all think you're having problems, try the landscape industry right around now, okay? And so one of the things this landscaper that I'm familiar with did is he realized the folks on his team from a basic financial skills standpoint, how do I open a checking account? How do I budget? How do I balance those sorts of things? How do I save for a car? How do I make sure I've got enough money for my bills the month? I mean, we're talking fundamental, basic financial challenges for some of the folks he was working with. So he started buying pizza on Wednesday nights and started holding his own financial skills training classes with his guys. Nothing fancy, nothing rocket science, nothing he had to get certified for, but he just saw a need from a basic life skill set and started investing his time and his experience and his wisdom with them and helping them grow their skills in other ways. And now he's got a group similar to you, although he can raise his prices to a certain extent, but it's such a cutthroat market in the work that he's doing. He's a little bit limited like you are, but not nearly as much. But things like this are keeping people with him for weeks and moving into months now, when he was turning his staff over maybe every 2 or 3 months in the last couple of years. And so just finding little things like that is an example of providing value in other ways that you might be able to do. There's a couple of other things there in terms of sort of benefit programs. You know, I've read a little bit about home purchase savings programs and partnering with banks and helping people find ways to solve some of their lodging problems through some strategic planning, working with them. Another piece is certification and educational partnerships. I came from a manufacturing organization before I came to do this, and we, in manufacturing, same problems, a little bit different flavor. And so one of the things we tried to do is we tried to partner with local career centers and 2-year colleges and tried to align our training programs to actually grant college credit at the same time and find creative ways to give some of our employees certificates or 2-year degrees by trying to work collectively with them to kind of mold our training and tie it into the school realm of things. And so being creative in certain ways like that to try to bring some of those things to the table. You know, I'm seeing other things, just feeding folks, being able to provide food for your employees and things like that, and other discounts and opportunities, other things that you can do that maybe you can't put more money in their pocket, but what you can do maybe is rely on maybe a little less of their money going out the door by doing some things related to that can be helpful in simple ways like that. And then the last one up there, connections to businesses or other supporters or donors, and what do they have to offer? When I did that chamber presentation a couple of weeks ago, and I threw this up here, the president of the chamber was like, "This is brilliant." And I'm like, well, of course you would think it's brilliant. You're the president of the chamber. But what his point was, and how many of you are members of a local chamber of some sort? Good amount of you. So this was in the Marion Chamber. And Matt up at the Marion Chamber is like, we literally have 45 different programs that are discounts or of things that are available to member organizations and employees of those organizations. There's no reason why you all can't go out, look at that list and adopt it as your own and market it to your people as if these are benefit programs you've brought to them, because you have. It's sitting right there for you. And these are the simple things like discounts at the mattress store. You know, I mean, just all things that they would be doing in the community. And so if you've got a chamber membership, I would strongly have somebody take a look and see what all those discounts are and start to bring those to the forefront of your people and let them see that there's other ways you can help them from a financial standpoint because of your connections, whether it's sponsors like that, or in this particular case, the chamber membership that I found kind of walked into accidentally during a chamber presentation. I didn't even think about it, but he's right. Most of us probably have those discounts and those opportunities sitting there. And if we can just bring those to the forefront to our folks, it's more value we're bringing for them along the way. Go ahead and bump to the next slide, please. All right. Right about now is where I think choosing the light blue heading probably wasn't the best idea on a sunny day. But basically what this is talking about here is investing and strengthening the relationship with your supervisors. And so the interesting fact, being an HR nerd like I've been for 25 plus years, does anyone know what the #1 reason is why people leave an organization? Feeling unappreciated? It's the direct relationship with a supervisor. So whether it's appreciation or other forms, right? Now, what do we typically hear when somebody says they're leaving? Money, right? Why do people say that? Yeah, what's easy about that? Well, sometimes it's true. And a lot of times it's true, but why do they start looking? Because they had a bad relationship with their supervisor, right? So you're going to hear a lot of times, I'm leaving for the money. And there are cases where people do that. And I think if we're all honest for a minute, we've all probably taken a job once or twice in our life for a dollar. That's why I worked at Rally's. It wasn't because I really loved the Rally Burger or anything like that, right? So we all, no disrespect to the Rally Burger fans out there, sorry. But being able to strengthen that bond and that relationship with a direct supervisor is one of the best things you can do to keep the great talent that you have inside of your organization. And so being able to make sure that they are appreciating folks, making sure that your supervisors are working to develop in skills and talents of your team members, making sure that they're regularly just connecting with them on a personal level. And this has become harder and harder over the last 20 months or so as everybody gets spread to the 5 winds and trying to figure everything out. So making sure that our supervisors are still just getting in touch with people as people. Probably an underrated one is addressing the poor performance that occurs in your organization. Your top performers get frustrated when lower performers bring the team down and drag more work to your top performers. As much as you don't want to lose people, I think you more so want to keep your top people. So how do we keep our supervisors keeping and upholding your standards and feeling comfortable to drive those standards so that more work doesn't land on your best people simply because we ask them to do it because we know they will do it? Those are some of the burnout, frustrations, things, and that direct relation to the supervisor doesn't just have to be that I wasn't appreciated or that I felt neglected. It can also be, I keep getting dumped on and I keep getting dumped on and they're not doing anything about this other issue. So we need to beef our supervisors up so that they can keep those standards up and keep rewarding your better performers. And then finally, we talked, we heard culture here 2 or 3 times about some of your strengths. If you've got a good culture, 99% sure you've got good supervisors that are doing what they need to do to uphold that culture and make sure that culture is living and breathing in every aspect of your organization. And so if we don't have our supervisors at that level, and if we don't have our supervisors engaged at that level, it becomes really difficult to create that feeling with our frontline employees who are out there working for us day to day. So we need our supervisors to be able to play at this level and be able to engage at this level doing these things to keep our other employees happy, and especially our top performing employees. Now, the interesting thing about all of this, if you wouldn't mind bumping to the next slide, please, is that these are the exact same things we need to do to our supervisors, right? We as leaders need to appreciate the great work they're doing. We as leaders need to actively develop the talent and skills of those supervisors. This bulleted list here is basically the same bulleted list from the previous slide. And if we aren't doing those things as leaders for our frontline supervisors, nobody is going to be doing it. And so I know you're busy. I know you're tired. I know you have a lot of things going on. But in my perspective, if you want to keep your best folks, the investment that you're going to make in your time and energy to support, develop, coach, and drive performance out of your supervisors is going to pay you back tenfold. Because if they're doing their job right and they're feeling good about what they're doing, you're not going to have to worry nearly as much about your current workforce and where they're thinking about going, or if they're going to have that conversation about another 50 cents an hour that somebody brought to them when they said, hey, have you thought about working at where have you? So I think that's one of the important things that we want to be able to think about with this. And when we talk about the ability to make sure that we're keeping our own, that's a really important factor there that I've found to be pretty beneficial. And go ahead and have you click if you would, please. Next thing kind of related to that is being able to market a path for growth. And we heard that as a couple of different of the opportunities that popped up here when we were talking before previously. All of you, I would assume in one form or another, have the opportunity with the current market conditions to, if not have opportunities for people to really grow and to sustain a career with you today in terms of new opportunities, they're not that far down the road, right? The challenge is we don't talk about those things oftentimes as leaders. We do all kinds of recruiting and all types of marketing to bring people in the door. And then once they're there, we typically just go to getting the work done. And this is where I said earlier, we got to kind of be in the marketing and sales business now, right? And I think it's incumbent upon us, if we're talking about keeping our folks, is using those things like what keeps you different. What makes you different, I should say. What are those things that are great opportunities inside of your organization? And figuring out ways to continue to drive that growth path and help people see what their career can be with you, what a career in your field can look like. I mean, how many of you in here started as a DSP in one step or another in your career? I mean, that's over half the room, right? How do we use those stories to build a path and growth for marketing and what the world, or growth for development and what that world can look like? You literally are surrounded by those stories. You're surrounded by those examples, but we don't necessarily always bring them to light. And so I think it's really important that we do those things. And if we take that mindset of marketing and we continue to market to your folks, the ability to be in a strong career that has impact and all those things that we talked about in strength and an opportunity up front, if we don't continue to sell those things, all of those other challenges of the world become the story of the day and the topic of the day. And so we have to own that message and that tone and that tenor, and we have to be able to visually demonstrate for people what that opportunity before them looks like and how they can take advantage of it. And so we have to have a strategy for that. We have to be constantly thinking about that. And the big thing that I'm seeing right now as an issue is employers are doing a lot of this for new employees. And then people that have been with them and loyal to them are sitting there looking at them going, hey, what about me? Right? If we do this part right, you can do both of those things. You can approach the marketplace and find new talent, and you can keep the ones you like. If you only do it out in the marketplace, you're going to create a rift with some of the folks that work for you who are going to think that they're not as valued as somebody brand new, maybe potentially coming off the street. Go ahead and ask you to bump to the next slide, if you would, please. The last piece here that I wanted to talk about is flexibility. And so I want to tell you an interesting story. It's actually a food manufacturer here in town. And I started working with them a couple months ago, and their workforce was diminishing, and they were getting more and more frustrated with folks that were coming and starting a job with them. And their shift typically was come in at 7, and they process a lot of meat products for like large cafeterias. In fact, if you had General Tso's chicken here, they may have provided the General Tso's chicken to this organization right here at Nationwide, right? Big buffets, things like that. So imagine you're just kind of on a work line, cranking out chicken all day, right? Not everybody's exciting goal or whatnot. Hard to make that attractive. It's also physically challenging, kind of similar to a lot of the work your DSPs do, right? Different work, but there's some physical strain that comes with doing that work at times. And so one of their frustrations was we can't get anybody to stay for a full shift. Even if we have somebody that we like, they may be like, hey, it's 3 o'clock and I'm out of here. And then they were allowing them to come back because they were just so desperate for folks, right? And so one of the things we talked about, and it came from one of the frustration discussions about one of their employees that they really liked, and he worked hard, but he never showed up on time. He was always half asleep. And they said he was a nice guy. And I'm like, well, why is he always half asleep? What's the deal? And like, well, he's a video gamer. And that's his thing. He likes to stay up all night and play video games. He can't be here on time at 7. Sometimes strolls in around 9:30. Does a great job. Kind of gets tired and almost falls asleep sometimes around 2, and then kind of struggles the rest of the day. I see some people smiling. Maybe you employ a couple of these folks. And so one of the things we talked about for them and their big issue is kind of end of the day and having shift availability and workforce availability at the end of the day. I was like, well, what happened if you just created what we called we ended up calling it the video game shift. And it was the 1 to 6 shift at their organization. It solved the afternoon problem and challenge for them because that was when they started to have a little bit drop off from a staffing standpoint. It fit the lifestyle of this particular 20-year-old gamer that really liked working, needed some money, but frankly, it was more important to play Call of Duty until about 4 in the morning until he crashed, right? And so reluctantly, they gave it a shot. And ironically, what happened is they started to attract more video gamers. And then the other thing that happened is they started attracting some stay-at-home moms because the moms struggle with getting their kids out the door earlier in the morning, but in the afternoon, they had a few more options. You know, it could be older siblings that could take a look at them. Maybe they go over to somebody's house. And so they actually, I wouldn't say solved all their workforce problems, but they put a dent in things by being creative and thinking about how to break up their shift structure a little bit to meet the market that was sitting in front of them, not necessarily how they've traditionally done it or how they think of things. So I'm not necessarily sitting here and advocating for you to go create the video gamer shift at your various facilities or locations and agencies, but I want you to kind of think of that story as an example of how can you be creative with the opportunities around you? Because what I'm finding right now is, yeah, people want money, but more than anything right now, they want flexibility. Right? They want to feel like they can work from home. Well, maybe you can't offer work from home, but maybe you can offer some different things, day of the week, time of the day kinds of things that might be able to help people adjust a little bit. Another one around flexibility is the second point there, which is consider paying weekly. So if you don't pay weekly right now, the big trend that I am seeing, especially in service agencies, is, you know, what you pay is what you can pay, but if you can get money in people's hands faster, they are much happier. There are so many people, for whatever reason, right? Back to we can talk about the reasons why or deal with it, right? There are people that need that money weekly, and 2 weeks is too long of a run for them. And if you need any more proof of that, as I was driving over here today, I live in Sunbury, so about a 20-minute drive. I heard 2 separate commercials from 2 different banks on the radio offering you the opportunity to get your paycheck 2 days in advance from those banks. So you're nodding, you've heard that, right? So if the banks are trying to attract people by giving them their money faster, why wouldn't we want to try to look and see some opportunities around that? A little bit more of an administrative pain in the butt? Absolutely, right? Not the easiest thing to pull off. And actually knowing a friend of mine that does payroll, even a little bit more costly for you. But it can be one of those things that if you can just get people the same amount of money sooner, they may feel a little bit more financially stable or be in a better position to want to be able to stick and stay with you. We talk about the part-time versus full-time flexible schedule things. The other thing too is I'm seeing the trend around folks want more cash on hand as opposed to benefits. And so if you've got a 401k or if you've got some of those things that are longer term kind of compensation things, you may want to think about, do I want to redirect that to something that's a little bit more in time? You know, whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing for folks and individually, that's one discussion. But when you think about who you're competing with, it's a group that in general wants to see, especially those younger populations, would rather see the cash in their pocket than that 3% match, maybe on a 401k or something like that. So something to consider there. And then, like I said before, those freedom and family connectors are really big drivers right now in what I'm seeing in the marketplace. And I do see some people willing to do things less from a financial standpoint, if they can have some of that flexibility and that ability to see and do things with family as part of that whole value adjustment that I think a lot of people have had to try to figure out over the last 20 months or so. So I'll pause there for a second. Any comments or questions? Are you seeing any of these things in your marketplace? Maybe any things that you're doing that you're having success kind of are related to kind of the flexibility or investing in your people, or any of the 5 things that we talked about here today? All right. If I go ahead and bump to the next slide, if you would, please. So what I wanted to do is just give you a moment again to reflect. Big part of the work that I do is trying to get people to slow down to go fast. So what I would love for you to do is to take about a minute, 90 seconds or so. Think about some of the things that I've talked about today, maybe some of the things you've heard your peers talk about. And I want you to just identify the best ideas or thoughts or strategies that have come to mind for you that popped up in this discussion that you think you could take and run with and be able to help retain the folks that you have and drive that higher retention rate with your key people. And I'll give you a couple minutes to jot those down. All right. So gave you a couple of things to think about there. Hopefully you were able to identify an idea or two that you might be able to take and run with. If I could have you bump ahead 2 here, not just 1, but 1 more. Thank you. Last thing I wanted to do before I wrapped up is talk a little bit about something that's probably integral to the work that we do, which is just basic behavior assessments. And so whether it's trying to figure out what some of those motivating factors are for folks, trying to help some of our leaders develop some of their behavior skills to become better leaders, those behavior tendencies of themselves and others become really crucial and important. And so one of the things I wanted to just make available to you all is attending today, and my appreciation is there's a link on there, and it's probably easier to look at on the CD of materials coming out from Motive than how I printed it. But there's a link on there if you want to try one of those assessments and get a flavor for kind of what that looks like and how you might be able to use that with your folks to be able to develop some leadership skills for your management and leadership team, or additionally with even in the hiring and selection process for certain positions, it becomes pretty helpful to help you kind of predict some of the behaviors you might see. I'm happy to provide that as a support, and my thanks to you all for coming out and spending some time with me today. So with that, before I wrap up, I just wanted to see, are there any final opportunities for questions or comments or feedback or anything that I can address for y'all before you, gosh, is lunch next? Oh, okay, good. I usually get that before lunch draw, and it's like, oh man. Any questions or feedback I'm happy to answer for you here in front of the group. We good with our folks on Zoom? All right. Well, hey, I thank you for your time and attention today. Hopefully you grabbed a couple things. And I even gave you 10 minutes of your day back. Use it wisely. Have a good one.